Hello, everyone. So today we are here with Tim Riley from True Traveller, one of our esteemed merchants. I'd say, partners in crime in some ways. Already invited me to a Christmas party. So we've got a few questions to ask him today, and I thought we'd kick it off with obviously, you've been in the travel insurance industry, fiercely connected to travel implicitly. So wanted to sort of both start off with discussing any disastrous stories you have of traveling and any sort of things that you could have resolved perhaps potentially with travel insurance. So why don't you kick it off and you tell a little story about, you've got various experiences, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, I suppose my own experiences of travelling, the worst time for me was when I was in Ladakh in northern India in the late 1980s. And I was going to see a monastery called Hemis, which is miles from anywhere. And I hired a jeep and a driver. And we were driving to Hemis, and then suddenly out of the blue, out jumped an Indian Army observation point and stopped the jeep and arrested me and my then girlfriend and took us to a local police station. And they asked for our passports. We didn't have passports with us. We left them in the sort of the hut we were staying in Leh, which is about 40 miles away. And I'd never really realised up until then, but the border between China and India in that part of the world is very fluid. And there's daily skirmishes between Chinese and Indian forces. So the Indian Army you see up in the north part of India are not like the guys with the old rifles you see in Delhi. So we were stuck in this police station in a cell. And my then girlfriend Beth was saying to him, "Tell them that you used to be in the army." And I said, No. You don't want to tell anybody that you used to be in the army if you're up here, because they're going to ask what army. So it was getting more and more exasperated. And then she said, "Tell them that you went to Sandhurst." And there's suddenly a captain, an Indian Army captain, so he looked around and said, "You went to Sandhurst?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "What course did you do?" I said, "I did SMC 37. He said, "I did SMC 41. So suddenly we were allowed out of jail and then escorted by Indian Army for the rest of the day. Yeah. So that was fine. So that's my worst experience, or most worrying experience when travelling.
Yeah.
Travel insurance-wise, I've never had a claim. I always travel with insurance. But I've seen so many mistakes that people make. So, the obvious ones are, losing your passport is the worst thing you could ever do, because getting a new passport issued abroad is a nightmare.
Yeah.
And not having too much cash. And when you go out, if you've got a wallet full of credit cards, just take one credit card with you. Keep the others in the room safe.
Yeah, seems reasonable. I think my worst one probably when I was traveling I was living in Kuala Lumpur for a time with my old company, and I did a sort of weekend away to Langkawi, and I had left my passport in the cab from the somebody mentioned that, from the airport to the sort of place I was staying. Luckily, because Langkawi, if it's a tiny island, the person who was running the sort of place I was staying, a hostel I was staying in, knew the cab company's owner or something, and then called up and managed to get the passport back. But I mean, I think I would have been in a bit of a pickle if I'd not got that back. But travel insurance, certainly. I think I was 25 at the time, so probably thought I was invincible. Therefore, didn't get anything.
A lot of people do think they're invincible.
I'm sure you've experienced that. Which brings us on to your business, True Traveller. I've been around for a while, but I mean, what inspired you to start it? What was the thinking?
Oh, well, like most people's career, you end up doing something you'd never thought you'd end up doing. So I was in the travel business, tour operator world for 25 years. Started off with Travel Finders back in the 1980s as a round-the-world travel consultant. And was in 25 years in the travel business, and ended up at TUI Travel as operations director for their specialist division, covering a few of their brands, including Oz Travel, which is probably their best-known brand. And they made me redundant, which was fine. I was part of a buyout anyway, and they gave me a medium-sized bag of cash. So I was then basically thinking, well, I'll start something up. So it was actually started up as a travel company, selling adventure holidays online, but at the same time we sold travel insurance, because your most average sort of high street insurance policy isn't going to cover trekking in Nepal, for example. And then we ended up doing far more travel insurance than we did of actual travel, which caused us issues with some of the travel licensing authorities. So it was easier then just to close down the travel side and just concentrate on the insurance side, which we've been doing now for the last 10 years.
Yeah, and it's obviously been fruitful because you've got to the point now where you're, decent size. People have heard of you, and you're, and so it's great to see. But I mean, obviously, we touched on a few of the stories there, but you must have some wild customer stories for people, trying to claim when they can't, or claiming when it's legitimate, but you're like, how have you done that? How has that happened?
We have some claims, that some medical claims of a sexual nature, which we can't really go on camera, which is bizarre, which they do put in and fill out the claim form of exactly what they were doing. And we're going, really? And we can't really just decline them.
Yeah.
I mean, they are claims. I mean, people always get worried about if I've had a drink and something goes wrong. If you've had a drink and something goes wrong, that's fine. If you've had 50 drinks and something goes wrong, then you're going to run into problems with a travel insurer. And likewise, you're in narcotics. We have had claims before of people being arrested by the police, being taken to the hospital, having to be strapped to the gurney because they're so out of it. And they put in a medical claim of $2,000 or whatever for their ER. And we go, no, sorry, but that's something we don't do. And the other thing, which is an issue, people riding motorbikes abroad when they don't have a driving license or a motorbike license. Yeah. Just like in this country, you cannot get insurance if you ride a motorbike without having the relevant license. Yeah. It's the same abroad. So if you do have an accident on your 50cc moped in Thailand or your 125 in Bali, you're going to come a cropper because you will not get cover for that from any insurance company. Yeah. So, I don't know what it is. The roads on the UK are surprisingly safe. The roads in Asia are not surprisingly incredibly unsafe. I mean, for example, Thailand, which has got a population not, fairly similar to the UK, 50 people die a day on scooters on the road. Wow. 50 a day. In Vietnam, where there's no actual figures because their government won't release them, it's estimated by the UN there's 250 people die every day on scooter accidents. Now, this is excluding massive, life-changing injuries. So it always amazes me why people ride motorbikes abroad. I have a motorbike license. I've been to Asia. There's no way I'd ride a motorbike in Asia. It's nuts.
Yeah, so just building on what you said there, I think everyone saw that Top Gear special episode where they were doing the mopeds around Vietnam, and maybe they think they can do the same thing.
The interesting thing about that all the filming, there was a Ford Transit in front of them and a Ford Transit behind them. They were protected. Clarkson came off his moped and he broke his wrist. Yeah. And he said it's the most scariest thing he's ever done. So, take that from Jeremy Clarkson. Yeah. It was great TV, and it has led to a lot of people, going around there. There's another loop they've opened in Vietnam called the Hang Loop, and it's an interesting bit of road because it's not all tarmacked. Right. And it is a dangerous road, and there's lots of local Vietnamese tour operators now saying, it's okay, we'll drive the motorbike and you can sit on the back. And we used to cover it. But quite recently, I mean, this summer, we had somebody on this 4-day trip, and the so-called professional motorcyclist went round a corner too fast, crashed into a truck that was coming the other way. Our customer was catapulted off the back of the motorbike. He wasn't wearing any protective clothing. He was just wearing shorts. And he landed on the tarmac road, and both of his kneecaps were ripped off. And we had to fly into Thailand for emergency surgery. He will never walk properly again. So we will not cover that now at all. Wow. So that's one to, strike up. It's, because it's not about the money, in fairness, because an insurance company will just put up the premiums.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I mean, COVID time, obviously there was gazillion cancellation claims, curtailment claims. People couldn't go on holiday. They lost a lot of money. They had to be flown home. There was some quite big COVID cases overseas, and travel insurance companies and the insurance industry generally lost a lot of money. And they'll make up for it eventually. But you get a massive once in a lifetime scenario like COVID. Hopefully, it's only going to be once in my lifetime. They'll lose that. But you want insurance there for the big stuff because if you lose a bag, big deal. If you lose your camera, big deal. Losing a passport is an absolute pain to get it replaced. But if you're in a car accident, and you end up in hospital, and the bills in somewhere fairly reasonable like Thailand, you're looking at £600 to £800 a day. Right. California, you're looking up to $8,000 a day. Yeah. New York, $8,000. Florida, $8,000 a day. So, and that's life-changing scenarios. And we've had air ambulances from all over the world. Biggest one so far this year was from Coffs Harbour in Australia. And that air ambulance, just the air ambulance on its own, was just shy of €300,000 because it was a private air ambulance.
Wow. I think that's staggering. I don't think anyone in the world could afford something like that. But in that moment, I'm sure your loved ones would want you to do everything they can to get that air ambulance to obviously, I had a situation with my mum was, she fell ill in France, and my dad was just obviously like, I'll just pay for everything and then hope the travel insurance comes through. But, he's in a position where he can do that. But if you're not in that position, it shows the real value of the...
Well, yeah, it's a remortgage. Yeah. Essentially. I mean, the slightly annoying thing, the media always paint, all insurance companies, regardless if it's travel or household or car insurance, to be all sharks. We're not. We want to do, the best thing. I mean, for people, because as I said, if you have a big insurer behind you, I mean, True Traveller, we use AXA as our insurer. They're not going to run out of money anytime soon. They're the 48th largest business in the world. With just increased prices. Yeah. So it's not the case we want to turn down a claim, but on the other hand, we've also got to protect the premium payers to not accept any old thing when it's not valid. So that's why sometimes, claims are declined if it's something we just plainly won't cover. They've taken out cover not realising, for example, I thought I was covered to go skydiving. And no, you didn't have cover to go skydiving. We had a claim just 2 weeks ago where somebody lost his Tesla car and he tried to claim it on his travel insurance for $80,000. I was like, well, hang on. We don't insure cars. We insure you. So, and no doubt that'll lead to a bad review. But, by the by, I mean, 92% of our claims are paid straight away and in full. So, which is above the industry average. Yeah. But, generally, insurers have a good rap, because if they don't, they just get in trouble with the government or the regulator.
Exactly. And it brings us quite nicely to the next question point that we have here is, what sets True Traveller apart from, other travel insurance companies and insurance in general?
Well, I think as far as travel insurance is concerned, we, I believe, are the only travel insurer in the UK now who settles their own claims. We moved to AXA 2 years ago, and they wanted our business. So I thought, well, let's just stick it out there and see what I can get them to agree to. And one of the things they agreed to, that we can settle all our own claims in-house. Cool. So which means that we can turn around claim payments very quickly within a couple of days, sometimes same day. Yeah. One of the things about True Traveller also is that with us, you can take out travel insurance when you're already on the road. So if you are travelling and your insurance with another company's run out and they won't extend it or won't let you take out a new policy, or you've just forgotten, you can take out cover when you're on the road with us. It's a little bit of a condition, like we won't accept any claims that are of a nature which couldn't be sudden in the first 2 days. So you don't want to pay for iPhones that, I've suddenly lost my iPhone within 24 hours. But within 48 hours, if you're in an accident or something, that's covered as normal. Yeah. And it has happened. We had one, I remember a couple of years ago, we had a guy in Vancouver take out his travel insurance with us. And then that evening, he was cycling to work. He was working a bar in the evening. He was knocked off by a car, and it was a fairly meaty claim. And, yes, absolutely. We did check with Vancouver PD at the time of the accident, and he was covered. And, we had another claim many years ago where a girl was in Zambia and she was in a taxi, and her insurance policy was due to expire at midnight UK time. And at 8 o'clock in the evening, she was in this taxi with some friends, and the taxi went off the road, and the taxi rolled, and she was the only survivor, but she was in a very bad way. and she had to be flown to Johannesburg for emergency surgery, etc., and then flown home. If that taxi accident had happened 5 hours later, she wouldn't have had any cover at all.
Yeah.
And that's just happens.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really interesting parts of your website. It's very interactive in terms of where you are in the world, and even if you are on the back of a bus in the middle of nowhere, presumably if your Wi-Fi is okay, you can get that insurance for whatever you're about to do. And I think the key thing I've noticed is the number of not warnings but conditions that you set out very clearly to your customers. Where if I want to go skydiving or archery or whatever it is, there is a specific requirement. Say, just so you know, if X happens, you will not be covered. So make sure the customers are informed that the policy will cover certain, accidents and situations and not others. I think that could be something that's quite unique.
The case that there are some insurers that you can take out online, and unless you take out the policy document, which can be, some of them are up to 80 pages, and read through the very, very small print, you're not going to see the exclusions.
Exactly.
We put it up front and centre. We encourage people to press the little information buttons that are all over the website. But generally the major exclusions, to be honest with you, is alcohol and drug abuse.
Yeah.
STIs, we get numerous claims every week for STIs. You just can't get insurance for STIs. But like I said earlier, some of the strange claims we've had through over the years, medical claims to do with some sort of very adventurous bedroom activities. There's no exclusions, so they just get paid. So it's just one of those things.
From your side, what are when you go on a vacation, what's the 3 things you're looking for to make it like the best vacation you can have? And
well, we tend to go on either trekking holidays or beach holidays or stay on an island. So I was lucky enough last month to go to Jordan.
Oh, lovely.
And obviously with the situation in Gaza, travel has just dropped like a stone to Jordan. So it was incredibly empty. So going to Petra and walking up to the treasury, there's about 60 people there.
Wow.
Normally there's up to 5,000.
Yeah.
And Jordan was fantastic, and a great country to look around. The people were lovely.
Yeah.
Jordan was. But I'm just as sort of satisfied lying on a beach. So there's got to be a sort of a plan. It's either sit on a beach, read books, go through the books you've been meaning to read all year, all lifetime, and actually get round to doing it, or go and see something different. So whether it's Peru or Jordan, next year we're sort of planning a big trip around Vietnam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, I'm very conscious of my passport. I can't bang on about enough not to lose your passport.
Yeah.
Because it's just soul destroying. And of course, iPhones as well. Your life is on your iPhone now. With banking, etc. So when we go out, if we're in a city abroad, doesn't matter if it's Berlin or Brighton, only one of us will take our iPhone. We won't both take our iPhones, just in case they both get stolen. Because that would just be a nightmare.
Yeah.
So we're that sort of conscious, purely because, to be honest with you, I don't see all the claims that come in because there's too many to see, but I get sort of pointed out the sort of interesting ones or the slightly weird ones, valid. Passports are the one thing you just don't want to lose.
Yeah. No, well, luckily, touch wood, it's never happened to me. Has it ever happened to you?
No.
No, yeah. That's that mini heart attack. My friends do rib me for it a little bit, but I do a passport check about 14 times. And when I leave every location, like, if I get off the train, it's a taxi, wherever, I'm checking passport check. And they do laugh at me, but it is something I'm very...
Once going around the Greek islands a long time ago, I left my wash bag in the bathroom of a hotel and go on the ferry to go to the next island. When I got there late in the evening, you couldn't buy anything, and then it was a weekend and all the stores were shut. Yeah. So I'm very diligent when I'm leaving a hotel room or an Airbnb to check bathrooms, check room safes, check cupboards again. But this year I was in New York and I left a jacket in a hotel, which is really annoying. I was at the airport and I realized, oh no, because it was a very hot day.
Oh, right.
It was one of those hot New York days, so you didn't need to put on a jacket. So I sort of, my great plan of always checking failed. I was sick though, so
we'll let you off. Yeah, no, so obviously it's good to hear those stories, and I'm sure you've got many more to tell. Perhaps some not safe for cameras. But just moving on to obviously payments companies. So you're here with your direct acquirer, Ecommpay. So I guess we curious to know a bit more about your previous experience with payment providers, without naming names, unless we have to bleep them all. But your previous experience, where they've come up a cropper, the common pitfalls that you face with them. And what sort of motivates you to sort of look around when they weren't doing the things you expected?
The big problem that hit all acquirers about 4 years ago was this marvellous idea dreamt up by the European Union of 3DS and then 3DS2. We never actually had an issue because people don't buy travel insurance with stolen credit cards, because obviously they would never get a claim paid. So we've never actually had a chargeback for that sort of reason. So the annoying thing is, of course, it was provided to the banks because obviously you get Visa and MasterCard, and then they're shelled out to all the different banks, etc. And the banks never took it seriously. And then at the 11th hour, they decided to put out to third parties the 3DS part of the transactions. So you ended up with a total hodgepodge of the ways that it had to be approved. Now, the acquirer we were using back then, who had been with for 10 years, and we'd never had any issues with, never got their head around it, for the simple reason they had actually been acquired themselves the year before. And as what happens with all large companies, synergy savings meant that all the decent people in the firm left. So they just couldn't sort out 3DS2. And there was, I think the limit that was put on when it all had to change was in September of 2020. And this particular acquirer decided, we're going to do it early, when they didn't actually have the ability to do it. It's fine with in stores, etc., with a card present, but customer not present, it just went crazy. So we had to leave them. We jumped ship to another one, who again didn't have it right. We jumped ship to another one, and a lot of failures on 3DS2. To be honest, be partly their fault and probably partly the bank's faults. I mean, Dutch banks, for example, were the very last ones to come on board with 3DS2. And we jumped another 2 times after that. One was actually quite a good acquirer, a US-based acquirer, but they had this hosted payment page which would only work if you had the most up-to-date operating system and browser on your PC or on your phone, which meant that 40% of the transactions wouldn't work. So that was quite upsetting. And then you sent me an email, I think, one day. And so then I thought, well, let's try this and let's see if that will work with them. But to be honest with you, the best thing about an acquirer is to never hear from them. just the money goes in your bank account on the day that it's supposed to go into your bank account. You don't get complaints from customers. I mean, 99.9% of our business is purely online. And it's our fault if it goes wrong. It's not your fault. It's like when you order something from Harrods and it's delivered by the courier company and the courier company loses the package or it's not delivered on time. You blame Harrods. You don't blame the delivery company.
Of course,
So, no, it is very important that you do get an acquirer that you're comfortable with who you never hear from.
Yeah, no, and well, we say that, and you're standing in the room full of getting interviewed by one of them. But no, it's good to give up your time and come down. But they know that it's going to be successful, and they're going to get the most out that they can get out of it. And then if there is a problem, there is someone they can speak to, and it's not a rigmarole to get the solution. I think that's the major thing.
Oh yeah, no, with our last acquirer, we had scenarios with them when our IT people were going through to them and saying, can you please explain why this went wrong? And they would come back after a month and said, we can't tell you because we only keep the logs for 2 weeks. Okay, so why didn't you reply to us 2 weeks ago? But I mean, I think now with especially the amount of business that's been transacted on handheld devices. I mean, Google Pay and Apple Pay are an absolute must. PayPal, I think, is probably dropping a little bit because of Google Pay and Apple Pay. But having that is an absolute must now. And the costs are no different. But any form of payment to make the customer make their life easier has got to be done. And and costs wise, it's just a cost of sale you've got to absorb.
Yeah, no, exactly, and it's interesting to hear that. Obviously, payment methods, we talk about it all the time, but it's if customers can pay with a certain payment method, they generally do. I actually know of a few businesses that use the payment methods as advertisement tools. So they'll say, you're from such and such country, we have such payment method, please use us. So that's really interesting to hear. But I mean, in terms of for specifically for travel insurance, what are the typical pain points or musts that you have to have with every payment provider? Obviously, I think we've mentioned T+1 in terms of paying off the insurer, but is there any other bits in there that you think are absolute musts for the acquirer?
I just think success rates. Again, because being financial services ourselves, any complaint that we get about the sales process, we have to report to the Financial Conduct Authority.
Yeah.
So if somebody says, I tried to pay with my MasterCard, but it didn't work, that is a complaint. So any form of dissatisfaction, and there's a log, there's a spreadsheet, and we have to report every single one to the FCA. I know, it is pretty full on. And if there is an error made, then if they blow it up, then we have to refer it to compliance, and it can get a bit nasty. So, as I say, just process the payment.
No, that's fair enough. And obviously we touched on it a little bit earlier. We obviously had just come out of the pandemic. Australia's only just properly reopened for travellers going there. But being on the other side of it in the travel insurance, well, I mean, I guess you're glad it's now travel insurance and not an OTA when that happened. But what was the major challenge for you in terms of sort of dealing with the back end of that? I mean, did you have COVID specific policies? What was the kind of the biggest issue for you there?
The biggest issue at that stage of COVID, to be honest with you, is trying to answer all the customer queries, because there was just total confusion in the minds of all travellers, because no country came out with the same answer. The World Health Organization came out with different answers. And nobody's quite sure. And then airlines just stopped flying. Yeah. So people were utterly stuck. Obviously, we all, Boris Johnson told everybody good to go home. Luckily, we could all work from home anyway. Yeah. So we didn't have any issues there. So it's basically communicating to clients, you are still covered. So we did, for people who were on the road when COVID started, that include cover for COVID, for anything, medical especially. Immediately COVID had started, then the insurers put out we're not covering COVID, simply because they didn't know what it was. Nobody knew what it was. Yeah. But then after a few months, COVID cover came back in again. And obviously then, the first batch of inoculations happened. And I was always in the front of the queue because I wanted to carry on travelling. It was communication with clients. Oddly, claims for medical were very minor. We only had 2 COVID medical claims, both really, really minor. Yeah. But of course, you remember what it was like on the press then. All these people dying all over the world. Most of our customers are generally aged under 50, so we weren't quite caught in that scenario. But of course, a lot of people were, and obviously people with pre-existing conditions were more prone to, getting into serious medical situations. Yeah. I know there were a couple of, that I heard of, a £2 or £3 million cases in the States of people with COVID who were kept in ventilators and in ICU for many, many, many days, months even.
Yeah. Sadly, it's one of these things we try to forget had happened, really, and it's a bit maddening to think that we were all locked down for that time period. I remember, just the whole going into the shops to when we'd just been told to go home, and it was just no one really knew what was going on. So.
The traffic lights. Do you remember suddenly in the United Kingdom, we had the Foreign Office telling people where they could go and the Department for Transport telling people where they couldn't go. And they had this traffic light system of red, couldn't go there at all, amber, you could go there, but you were warned not to, and green, you could go there. Yeah. And then suddenly, just before Easter, I think it was 2021, the Department for Transport decided to make France double amber.
Yeah.
Now, there was hundreds of thousands of people due to go to France, desperate to travel.
Oh, for the skiing and stuff.
They went double amber. And they went double amber because there had been an outbreak of COVID in a French department.
Yeah.
Réunion Island, which is the bottom of the Indian Ocean.
Yeah.
Nowhere near France.
Just the longest internal flight, isn't it?
It was just bizarre.
Yeah, Charles de Gaulle. They're in the Pacific, aren't they?
Yeah, they're down in the Indian Ocean. Near Madagascar, really.
Yeah.
So that was just utterly nonsensical.
Just switching to more positive topics, this is where you can pay me lots of compliments, you see. So what actually attracted you to Ecommpay? What was obviously you weren't happy with the current provider. I get that, but from your perspective, what were you impressed with when sort of first talking to us?
You have to bear in mind that on the whole, financial services world, including insurance, are rubbish. We have a new situation that was introduced by the Financial Conduct Authority in July called Consumer Duty.
Yeah.
So always put the customers first. So in Consumer Duty, it says you must have, this is a true example, you must have something in place to measure how long it takes you to answer the phone call. And if we ask you how long it takes to answer the phone call, you can tell us. It doesn't actually say, please answer the phone. So when you phone up your bank, you're on hold for an hour before you get through to someone. So there is a very low bar when it comes to anything in financial services. In the insurance world, most insurance companies, I'm talking the insurance companies like Allianz, AXA, AIG, their attitude is, well, if we're going to pick up the business somewhere else, we don't have to do a good business for you because we have the capacity to write this business. And that is an issue for a lot of insurers or intermediaries, knowing where to get the business from. So we were not having a very good time with our previous acquirer. There'd been a massive change in staff there, or they'd all gone. I wasn't quite sure it was one or the other. And it came to the stage, I'm afraid to say, well, somebody's got to be good. Someone's got to do a good job out there. And of course, you did have all the payment methods, and you did have the hosted payment page, which was pretty good. Because one thing, if you're obviously a large company with a big IT department, you can host your own payment pages, but it is quite complex. Yeah. Sure, you'll do the Visa, MasterCard stuff, then you can do the American Express stuff, and then you can get your certificate from Apple Pay and your certificate from Google Pay. But of course, you got much more than that because you got all the other transfer methods within Europe, like P24 in Poland, etc. So doing that as an individual company is a big resource. So the hosted payment page is good. And right at the beginning, I asked, can some little changes be done? I wasn't sure if it's done just for me or for everybody. But the hosted payment page does work. And of course, then as it's all your IT guys do, whereas our IT guys work on some other projects as well, it means that if things change, you can adapt and change it pretty quickly. So if a particular bank in France or Belgium decides to change what they do, you can change it at your end.
Yeah, I thought it's great to hear. I mean, I think that's the major thing for us. We're the experts in payments. We want you to focus on being the best travel insurer in the world, and we will focus on being the best payment provider in the world. So, like we said, that you don't have to hear from us. And only when we do get in contact, it's because we've got a nice shiny new toy to share with you, and that's the real what we're trying to do. It was great to have you along, and I think it's probably one of the fastest replies I've got to a sort of relatively cold outreach ever. I think it was within about 10 minutes you replied, saying, yeah, sure, go ahead.
Well, to be honest with you, I'd never heard of Ecommpay.
Yeah.
And it's quite interesting, especially on LinkedIn. You suddenly get bombarded by Ecommpay all the time. And you think, well, they were never there before. And I'd been vaguely trying to find other acquirers who could do the job, because one of your biggest competitors would always turn us down because we may have somebody go on holiday to Cuba, which is absolutely allowed if you're from Europe. Yeah. You can go to Cuba. But they said, oh, no, you couldn't possibly do that. And I said, really? Okay. It was just their own rule for the sale of health and accident and health insurance, even to Americans. You can go to Cuba.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's I think it's balancing that sanction, the sanction rules that are very, hard edged with relative common sense. I think it's really important. I mean, I've been on a holiday to Cuba. It's a fantastic place, and it's actually one of my best holidays I ever had, because we did a bit of Havana, went to the cigar factories and all the rest of it, rode in the fancy cars, and then went to the beach afterwards and drank lots of rum on the beach with my dad. So look, it's good that we tick in all those boxes for you. Just like changing a slight tack, so you can hold the compliments for next time. Obviously, we talked about adding these payment methods and how important. You mentioned P24, but what other things do you think True Traveller have done that have really helped you adapt to new payment processes to really stay competitive in the market? It's a very competitive space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that having the most amount of payment types you can have, within reason, on the payment page. I mean, when you go to a clothing store now, generally, you've got at least 8 or 9 different ways of paying. And, we still accept American Express. A lot of merchants don't accept American Express. We do. We accept PayPal and all the rest of it. So, yeah, you don't want any barriers to sale. And if you've got a barrier for sale because, you don't do Apple Pay or you don't do Google Pay, etc., and you're going to make them go somewhere else, that's a little bit self-defeating. And it doesn't cost any more. And the hosted payment page is pretty straightforward to implement.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're, I think on the payment side, we're there. On the website side, there's always work to do.
Yeah, sure.
On the claims side and the assistance side, there's always work to do. So, you can never sit down. If you've ever got a website and even a blog and you say, oh, that's finished, well, you're lying. Because it never is finished.
No.
And I'm sure that you guys are going to, hopefully you guys are going to improve the hosted payment page.
Yeah.
Maybe do a bit of redesign, cut things down. Time-wise, it's pretty good. Although I do appreciate the fact that you are at the mercy of the credit card companies and banks you have to deal with. So errors may not be yours, but maybe theirs. But the problem is for the retailer who has your product on their site, it's actually they who get it in the neck.
Yeah, it's the courier example. I think is a really, really good one. We have to remember that you do helpfully display our name on the website, and we very much appreciate that. I think it's more for the customer. They're not buying from us, they're buying from you. And if something goes wrong with the payment, they're calling you, they're not calling us.
Yeah, no, it's everything about the whole transaction, whether it's buying the policy, taking the policy with you, putting it on your wallet on your iPhone, which we have with our policies, to the claim abroad, to getting stuff paid for, everything is always our fault. There are issues with paying hospitals in the States who massively overcharge. And what we have to do, and come with every other insurer out there, is do what's called cost containment.
Yeah.
So, for example, we have had bills in this month for minor cuts and abrasions over $2,000 from a hospital. AXA will go back and say, we're not paying you $2,000, we'll give you $500.
Yeah.
So it goes through a cost containment routine. We take over the claim, we tell the hospital, AXA tells the hospital it's our claim, leave the customer alone, and the hospital starts threatening or using companies to threaten the customer to get them to pay directly. Yeah. It's only the States and Canada where this happens, nowhere else in the world, because no one else does it.
Yeah, I mean, look, obviously trends is a bit of a buzzword, and I try to steer clear of those sort of cliches, but, in 5 years' time, what do you think is the most important thing that travel insurance companies will need from payment providers and generally need to do to ensure their long-term success? What's going to be common practice, I suppose, in 5 years' time for you?
Paying by the month for long-term policies. That's going to be the norm. It won't work in some situations. For example, if you're going to Canada on a work permit, they're going to want to see your insurance for the 2 years. Otherwise, they won't give you a work permit for 2 years. But I think monthly payments is going to be the norm for long-term travel insurance. For short-term policies, I think the main thing is more of it's going to be online on mobile devices. So paper documents should disappear. The FCA still insist we post out documents to customers if they want them, which is really annoying because not only have you got the policy documents, you've got the IPID, details in the insurer, the certificate. So essentially it ends up being about 60 pieces of paper for something that probably is never going to be opened. And more online claims. Our claims have just gone online now, so people can do it on their phones and they can take photos of the documents and just send them through to us. And hopefully travel will be, get even safer. And hopefully people will, be a bit more worldly wise and take some advice like, don't lose your passport, put stuff in your room safe, don't ride motorbike.
Don't ride a motorbike. I was just about to say that. That's interesting. I mean, obviously, the monthly claim stuff, I think it's going to be interesting, particularly for a business like yours, which I think, like you said before, you cater more towards the, people under 50, maybe backpackers, traditionally, I guess. But do you think the monthly subscription model kind of works for those backpackers? Maybe my sister's just gone traveling for 8 months. That might work for her. But if she's only traveling for 2 weeks, do you think weekly policies, weekly?
Weekly's too much. And also the cost for a week is really quite low. A policy in Europe for a week, you're looking at £10-15 from some providers. But if you're, say, paying $45 a month, you're going to pay it monthly. Because if you come back home early, you can just cancel the policy, give 10 days notice and cancel. So we will be introducing a new product next year designed around that. It won't work in some scenarios where, as I said, for like work permits, etc., or if you've got a J1 visa with the States, you won't be able to use it for that. But I think for a sort of nomadic health insurance is what people want, because people now don't like paying out unless they really have to. So, for example, now people won't use a SIM card abroad, even though there's an eSIM you can easily download to your phone. They'll go for Wi-Fi absolutely everywhere. So I think monthly payments is going to be, in 5 years, it's going to be the norm. We'll move to a situation doing that next year. Something we've still got to have a conversation on, by the way.
That's definitely mentioned. We've got a few options that we can definitely discuss. And look, finally, final question for us. Obviously, you mentioned specific things you're going to be doing in 5 years' time with your travel insurance in general. Payments, obviously, I guess it's a bit of feedback, I suppose, to a certain extent. Is in that 5 year period, hopefully, when you're still processing with us, and we're obviously making many millions, and we're all doing pretty well. What would be like the must that you can see? Obviously, you mentioned subscription payments, but is there any other payment functionalities or flows that you think are going to be vital for payment providers to have in order to service a business like yours?
I don't know. We've kind of got to look at see what the two big boys do, and I'm talking about the A's and the G's, because really the world, technology-wise for the consumer does roll around Apple and Google. They've both done their Apple and Google Pay model, which, from the outside looking in seems to work pretty well. They don't seem to have much fraud on that side of things, because obviously, it's using their device and
it's a pre-auth card, really, basically. It's hard to get fraud from that.
So I think probably it's going to be quite interesting to see what happens with some of the banks. I think there's going to be a lot more merging of banks, etc. And, new players on the market. You see in the UK, the old high street banks, well, they're hardly high street anymore. They're closing branches left, right and centre. And you've got the other, the new kids on the block coming out there and seeing what comes with them. But, essentially, I think as long as Google and Apple are supporting Visa and MasterCard, they are still going to rule the waves when it comes to card payments for, I think, many years to come. Certainly beyond 5 years, I would say.
Certainly. I think it, just to end on that thought, you mentioned 3DS. It can be a bit of a pain for sure, but it is probably the quickest and easiest way to circumnavigate it, because you're not really, because the card is still 3DS authorized. Very, very hard to get a fraudulent payment on Google or Apple Pay. And as such, the customer, if they're on their phone, they don't have to enter the 3-digit. Generally speaking, with Google and Apple Pay, it is, 9 times out of 10, it's a fingerprint. So, any merchant doesn't have right now and does anything digitally, they need to speak to their acquirer and get it on board.
Yeah, if you're selling on mobile devices and you don't have Apple Pay or Google Pay, you really got to speak to your IT people pretty quickly, because you will be left behind, because people will just walk away.
Yeah, exactly. I think that concludes everything from our side. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for choosing to work with us and saying some nice things. And we'll chat about the subscription payment.
Great. Thank you.
Cool.